Hello, and welcome to a new episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina. Each week, we dive into a blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're an architect enthusiast, have a passion for wanderlust, want to discover holistic approaches to rejuvenate your body and mind, or are intrigued to learn about Vastu Shastra with a modern approach, you've come to the right place. Join me as I sit down with inspiring, like-minded women from various walks of life. We will delve into their journeys to discuss the challenges and moments that define their paths. So sit back, relax, and let the spark of positive energy ignite your curiosity. Hi, it's me, Katerina. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you something that can change the trajectory of your life. If you are ready to start your own architecture firm but are feeling overwhelmed by where to begin, I understand, because I felt the same way when I first embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. This is why I have created the ebook, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. This comprehensive workbook contains everything I wish I had known before starting my own firm. From building a solid business plan to creating your brand, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm offers a step-by-step guide tailored to your timeline, whether you're launching your firm today, next month, or in a few years. Dive into essential topics like financial planning, organization strategies, and how to secure your first client, all in one convenient resource. That's right, you don't have to spend hours researching. I have done that for you so you can focus on building your business. And that's not all. With your purchase, you'll also receive an exclusive meditation for business owners, mindfulness tips, a crystal guide for support, and gratitude exercises to help you stay focused and positive throughout your journey. Turn your dream of having your own firm into a reality with the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. Click on the link in the show notes to get your copy today. Now, let's dive into the episode. Today, I am recording from Boston, from an Airbnb in Boston. So today's episode is a little different. There might be a little street noise. The internet, Wi-Fi has been hit or miss. So it's definitely been interesting. We're going to see how this episode plays out. But I just wanted to kind of share with you a little life update, personal update, business update, because once this episode airs, I will have celebrated a pretty big anniversary, which is my 1 year of fully being on my own, working for myself. So there's been a lot of reflecting coming up to that anniversary date, as well as the last few weeks have just been a whirlwind of travel, of family things coming up. And I've really had to learn how to pivot my business with just all of these changes that have come up. So I want to share with you that in today's episode. Before we begin, I want to share with you something that I am grateful for. I know we begin every episode by sharing, what are we grateful for in the present moment? And for me right now, what I am most grateful for is my business, really, and having my business at the time of my life right now, because, and I'll get into details about this, later on in the episode, but really the big thing that has happened over the last few weeks. I visited a sick family member in the Czech Republic. A grandparent of mine passed away here in the United States. And so, there's just been a lot of things that have had to go on. I've been traveling. I've also went here in Boston for my sister's graduation. So there has been a lot of family events that have come up, and my business has allowed me to be present and to prioritize family and personal matters right now rather than business, while still keeping my business going, projects being approved at city level, at HOA levels. I've sold ebooks. There has been still my business running in the background while I have been able to focus my attention. And I'm really grateful for the business that I have set up, the foundations that I have built in the last year now to be able to, really, this also was a big test of the systems I have in place, the procedures I have in place for getting drawings through, client meetings, things like that. How does everything run? All of the ways I've set up my business, they've really been put to the test this last month. And I'm just so grateful for how I set up my business, because in the past, working 9-to-5 job for someone else, I never felt the support that I feel now when it comes to business and being able to work, because, I love what I do. I love my job. And so working even while I was traveling has been really interesting, and, keeping the business running and working. And sometimes you just need that mental break to go work on something and take a break from, a lot of the family and personal things going on. And so having my business to be able to take it with me And just knowing that the foundation I built for my business, I'm just so grateful for what I have created with it. So I'm thinking about where to start this podcast episode because a lot has happened and there's a lot of personal things I do want to share and some that I will not be sharing. But also to kind of update you on, where life has taken me. So I'm recording currently from an Airbnb in Boston, Massachusetts, on the East Coast of the United States. And I am here for my sister's college graduation. Previously, I was actually in Prague, Czech Republic, where I'm originally from, visiting a sick family member. This trip to Boston obviously was planned a little bit more in advance, but the trip to Czech was kind of ended up being a last minute trip to visit the sick family member. And then a week before I was supposed to leave, I had a grandparent pass away here in the United States. And so just the emotionally energetic depletion of just knowing to go visit a sick family member, all of the travel coordination and having a grandparent pass away, and all of this means that the last few weeks have been a lot, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially. I mean, that's one thing, sometimes people don't talk about is, it was absolutely not in our budget for me to go to Europe this year. And of course, buying a ticket, kind of semi last minute, definitely was something we were not anticipating. And so there was just a lot of shifts and changes the last few weeks that have really tested me in so many ways, but I am so proud of how I have been able to handle all of these changes. And so after I leave Boston, I'll be heading towards Colorado to visit the family and attend the memorial service. So all of my plans have been kind of changing and shifting the last few weeks. So it has been a lot to take on, all at once. Like I said, personally, emotionally, mentally, physically, just a lot of the travel. And then having my business really took off at the beginning of this year, that first quarter of 2024. And I have multiple projects going right now. And it was very interesting to prepare for this trip, knowing that I would be gone for a certain amount of time. Obviously, that time has shifted and changed as things have been happening and evolving. And I've had to pivot with every, form of information and news. But I'm really proud of how I set everything up because as it came to, for example, like the podcast, all of that was pre-done ahead of time. I've had episodes edited, ready. I've had all the social media posts ready, knowing that. So that I knew would be covered. And then when it came to my business and seeing where all of the projects were, and thinking about how am I going to be working on projects, as I'm traveling, as I'm on the airplane, as I'm, at my grandparents' house, like how am I going to be managing, and balancing all of that? And so I actually ended up having a conversation with my business mentor, and I asked her, I'm a little nervous about the upcoming travels. And so probably like a week and a half out, I ended up messaging her and said, I'm really concerned about how am I going to have the energy, the mental capacity to keep working? And she gave me some really amazing advice. And that was, these travels and everything that's happening personally to you right now is really going to prioritize and highlight what is important for you in your business and personally. And you are going to see and learn so much from this experience. It's really going to test you. And that was really great advice because I started to look at, instead of being like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed and getting all negative about, oh my gosh, all these flights and this and all the stress of it, I thought, okay, great. I am just going to go with the flow, which is very hard for me to do. And I'm very organized, pitta energy, just like color coding, very, very organized, just kind of I like things scheduled, the control, having control, like letting go of control is very hard for me to do. And so this trip, I really had to just say, okay, I'm going to get done what I'm going to get done. And going back to what my business coach said is thinking about what am I going to prioritize. And so I wrote down all of my projects where they are in the current, stages of design or submittals through the city. And I started to prioritize them on what do I need to focus on first. Now, of course, I also let all of my clients know the situation that was coming up. And in my business, my big thing is honesty and transparency. And I'm very grateful for how my clients have been incredibly supportive of me, taking time off traveling. Of course, I'm sure it would be it would be a different experience if I said, "Hey, I'm just going to, to stay in some, five-star resort for 5 weeks. Hey, good luck on your projects. You'll hear from me in 5 weeks." Definitely a different approach, but I had a conversation with each of my clients and essentially said, here's what's coming up. Let's talk about where your project is in the stages of design, in the stages of city submittal, and how that will affect the schedule. And one of my clients was okay with me kind of putting the project on the back burner because of scheduling for them. They were like, well, we're kind of hoping construction will start later than we originally anticipated. So I said, well, if you're fine with that, I am going to kind of put you on the lower priority of getting things through the city and everything. And just having those honest conversations was incredibly helpful for me to understand, where do I prioritize the project? And then just having that conversation with the clients and not being afraid to tell them, because life happens, right? Life happens. We can't control a lot of things. And so rather than I could have just been like, hiding it or something that I'm leaving and trying to focus, but I was very honest and I said, I will be accessible by email. Please note that, the 9-hour time difference, and I will answer emails when I can get to them, but just know I will be accessible with just a delay. But I will be working on certain projects. I have been very communicative with clients, knowing if I receive something, I've reviewed it, just kind of staying on track with a lot of the projects, but them also understanding and knowing and accepting that, yeah, I'm not going to be as accessible as I was when I'm back home and I can, get in my car and drive to the job site to look at stuff. And so I also went to job sites ahead of time and really just prepped and said, what does everybody need from me before I leave? Because I will not be physically accessible until I get back. And that date has now kind of shifted and changed a little bit more as well. So there's just a lot that had to be taken into consideration on my business end. And so learning to prioritize. And so I also want this episode to be for you if you are someone who is also has their own business or is an entrepreneur and is thinking like, oh my gosh, what happens when life happens, right? A family member gets sick or passes away or your child gets sick. And I'm not talking about a few days off. I'm talking about few weeks, possibly even several months. This could even be maternity leave, and this could be like taking care of someone for longer periods of time. And I know for my example, I'm only getting a taste of this kind of, world flipped upside down approach to me being able to get things done. I'm only having this, for a few weeks, but still it has shown me what has worked in my business as far as me setting up, the systems and the processes in place that I have been working on this last year. And it's really put my business to the test of, okay, how are you going to get things done? There's also the difference of like, everything is very digital. Thankfully, the one city that I'm submitting drawings to while I am traveling does digital submittals. And so what does that look like? That was also something as I was making that list, which I would recommend to you. Again, going back to this episode, I want it to be if you are thinking like, oh my gosh, I have some, big changes coming up, or how do I prepare for my life being the priority, but keeping my business running in the background. And so this is kind of, I also wanted to share my advice on what I have seen that has worked for me and what I've seen that doesn't work for me. And so that prioritizing, listing everything out, listing what submittal needs to get done, which client, to keep the project moving as well, because I do have projects under construction, how to keep those moving while I'm away so that, because I never want it to be a delay in a project because of me. I know sometimes the architect can get blamed, especially during construction, but so I just want to keep pushing my stuff through, but knowing that also I may not have the mental capacity or energy to devote time to my work while I'm traveling. And so that was another thing that I ended up listing out is, okay, then I listed out what are my priorities? What are things I absolutely need to get done while I am away? And then like, what do I need to be able to get them done? So that means, do I need my computer? Do I need Wi-Fi connection? Because, right, I'm also sitting on an airplane multiple hours at a time. Is there something that I can work on while I'm in the air? Is there something that I can work on while I am waiting at the airport? Do I have to have, my mouse pad and computer out at all times? Does it also mean I'm looking at plans and I'm cross-referencing them? Do I have to be in a quiet environment? Does this task only take a half hour, or does this take 2 hours of concentration where I need to focus on it? So that was another way I organized a lot of my tasks of, okay, this one few tasks are you're sitting at the airport and you're waiting for your flight to board and maybe there's a delay or whatever. Here's a few tasks that I can work on. And here's what I can work on the airplane. Now, this is where I want to share something that did not work for me, which was drawing in AutoCAD on the airplane. Not the best idea. Now, maybe if you fly first class, there's enough space, and business class, but I had to fly economy, of course. So there was not enough space. I mean, I did end up CADing for a little bit, but it was definitely difficult to CAD where I had my laptop, the mouse, and then I was, looking at some red lines and then having to make sure I caught the red lines and highlighting them. It was just not enough space. So that was something I learned, like, okay, a lot of the tasks that I thought I could do on the airplane, especially that came to AutoCAD, are not possible, are not attainable for me to do. And so that was, something that didn't work for me. But yet in that moment, I could have easily gotten frustrated and stressed that now I can't get all of, XYZ done because it didn't end up, working for me because I don't have the room for my mouse, for my laptop, all of that. And so you just kind of learn to pivot and let that moment go. And so instead, I ended up editing some podcast episode, putting notes together for my editor, and which I don't need all of the space for. So just ended up looking at my to-do list. I still want to be productive. I still have the energy. And I was able to get, 2 episodes put together with notes. And I even squeezed in a movie to just watch on the airplane and just kind of, decompress. Also, my computer, I was, at the mercy of how long would my battery last as well. So that was also something I had to take into consideration. And so putting all of that together, of all of, the priorities, the lists that I needed to get done, I saw what worked for me as well was just fully letting go of, okay, you may not be able to get this done. One huge thing I also had to learn was to create boundaries, especially when it comes to family, and learning to say no. And that was a big one because for me, flying into the Czech Republic, I have a lot of family there. I did not let a lot of family know that I was coming either because I wasn't sure what situation I was flying into. I was only flying in for a few days. I wasn't sure how sick that family member was going to be when I arrived because obviously it was not a good situation if I was flying halfway across the world. And so, I wasn't sure. And every day things were changing, things were progressing. So I kept a very open schedule, but I also made boundaries of, okay, I will see family after 12 o'clock, so noon, every day. And the first morning, after I arrived, the first morning, I let myself, no alarm, sleep in, get as much sleep as I possibly can, and then maybe check out some emails, get a few things done, kind of get my bearings around. I don't have to hit the ground running the first morning I arrive, having to get work done because I've been traveling for 36 hours. The flights there, it ended up being an incredibly long journey. I traveled about 36 hours, which is very unusual, but due to a lot of the flights I had and delays and just the way it ended up being configured, I did end up traveling 36 hours door to door. So from my home to my grandparents' house in the Czech Republic, which was exhausting within of itself. And I made sure to give myself grace while traveling and knowing I can get some stuff done, but also remembering I don't want to burn out, especially, mentally, physically, emotionally. I also have jet lag. I don't want to get sick. That was the biggest thing. I do not want to get sick during this time. And so making sure I put myself first and creating those boundaries and not getting sick was a huge priority of mine, right? And that goes back to, realizing what are my priorities. And the number one priority was my health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Biggest concern, everything, any situation that came up, I assessed it with how is this going to affect me? And that means even creating boundaries. And so letting family know I will not be available until 12 o'clock, which means I had all morning to work on if it was work, if it was to just relax, maybe just sit and drink my tea and meditate and really just let myself, you know, work with the jet lag as well. And, but there was a morning that I ended up having to kind of pivot those plans because a family member needed me. And I, again, assess that situation. Is this something I am willing to change my schedule? Will this activity, deplete my energy or not? And I was able to make that choice, but really making sure that I prioritized myself was such a huge component to me being able to be successful in all of this in what I think has been a very successful few weeks because, and I'm really glad I was able to, record this podcast episode actually while I'm traveling. And I hope the audio comes out good because actually, believe it or not, this is like take 4. I actually recorded the podcast episode yesterday and had terrible internet issues and ended up realizing that the microphone that was associated to the recording was my computer microphone, which is absolute garbage. So, learning to pivot, here we are this morning. I am recording the podcast episode again. Hopefully, it turns out well. Of course, there's major construction happening out this morning, but just learning to let go and realizing, things are going to get done when they get done. And also, that's another thing, is work is also always going to be there for you, right? And it's always going to be waiting for you. You don't have to worry about it, not being there, I feel, because especially with all of the to-do lists I had, and there were moments where I was like, I'd rather not be working right now. And I was able to make that decision and be like, I'd rather spend more time with this family member, or I'd rather go and do this, right? Because I also wanted to have a little fun. So of course, I had a little shopping excursion, didn't end up buying anything. That's a whole other story, but ended up making time for myself to do things that excite me and that kind of recharge my battery in ways that not just only, eating, sleeping, meditating, and resting would do, but just to also have some fun, right? Been able to travel in beautiful places the last few weeks and making sure I do leave some time for fun as well. And it's not so restricted of it's only family time and only work time, but allowing myself to have fun and to have the freedom to be able to just, make my schedule and pivot and change as the days change and as things come up. And so looking back now on all of the last few weeks of preparing for this travel and then being gone, one of the major things I have learned is that, like I said, business will just keep running. And that has been really rewarding. I had two major approvals come through the first few days I was in the Czech Republic. And that was so incredibly gratifying because, and that's something too to think about, is when you're thinking about taking some time off or before a trip, for example, is there things that you can do that you can submit ahead of time, especially like if you're thinking about planning department submittals, building department submittals, those typically take, a few days, few weeks to turn around, or corrections to consultants. There was a lot of work that unfortunately, there wasn't anything in the pipeline that I could submit before I was leaving, but there were corrections to consultants. I redlined up, a few submittals in preparation that when I do get back, I will be able to submit plans because I'll be working on my corrections. All of the consultants will be working on theirs. And, so I was able to get HOA approval on a major project. I was also able to get fire department approval while I was gone. And that just goes to show there are things that can be working in the background while you are, traveling and working on stuff. And I know it's been interesting because as an architect, the way my business makes money is my billable hours. If I am not working, my business isn't making money, right? And so that was another concern of mine is, how am I going to keep business because, I'm traveling and I can't fully focus my energy as I would at home and the hours I usually, billable hours I submit. But, I'm actually pleasantly surprised how many billable hours I've been able to get. And that's knowing that there's been travel, there's been family time. So that's been good as well. And going back to though having money come in, like I said, as an architect, I have billable hours. Because right now I still do everything. I haven't delegated out. I'm debating getting a drafts person. My business isn't ready for it yet financially, and also to have someone come on to help me with draft work. But also, I am still figuring out some of my drawing systems, how drawings will appear, because I've had such small projects at the beginning. Like I'm finally getting to doing a big first construction document site coming up in a few months. And what is that all going to look like? So it wouldn't be productive, I think, to give someone my drawings while I'm still figuring out systems, because I don't even know how I would lead them to tell them this is how I want the drawings done. But seeing how the last few weeks have gone has also shown me where in the future can I delegate work to keep working, right? To keep the business, to keep drawings going. Now I know I could submit XYZ to a drafts person to get, projects going while I'm traveling, keeping things, going. I can review them. What does that all look like? So that's definitely, something I have also been thinking about in the back of my mind is, what could this situation look like a few months from now or a year from now when I do have someone I can have help me and delegate more work to, right? And another thing that also has been really a pleasant surprise is, my ebook's still selling while I'm traveling. And that has been also something gratifying because that was one of the reasons I also created the ebook, is to have some sort of income that doesn't mean I have to be sitting at the computer working on billable hours. And so it's been really rewarding to see that as well, and to know that I can still sell and make money and have that come in through me just having created something as well. And that was one of the reasons I also put together the ebook. So that has been really, really rewarding as well. So just thinking about how the last few weeks have been incredible. Just the amount of work I've been able to get done while also managing and balancing all of the emotions that come up with what is happening. And there's also a few other personal things that I won't get into in this episode, but it has been a lot. It has been incredibly a lot. And I'm glad I'm able to record this, like I said, this episode while I've been traveling, because I did want to share kind of in the moment how these emotions are coming up. There's no way I would have recorded a few days ago because there were still so many emotions. But now I've had time to recharge, regroup also, and, just kind of feel my feelings. And that's another big thing too, is knowing that throughout all of this, and this is also for a lot of people who have family members who live far away, or you visit home, and if home is in another country, there are a lot of emotions that can come up during that time. Another big thing that I've realized is in the last few weeks, I have been in every state or city that I lived in until I was 18, because once I turned 18, I went to Chicago, and Chicago was not on the itinerary this year. And so that has been really interesting, and seeing the emotions that have come up from visiting a lot of these childhood areas and homes, and the energies of that, and seeing what emotions come up for me then as well. To conclude, the episode, I just want to share with you that if you feel like you are struggling to balance everything, there's something in your life and life has really started to speed up again. I think for a lot of people, and I know especially the beginning of this year has been very life-changing. I know for some of my friends and for me in life, a lot of life-changing things have been happening, and it's been quite a start to 2024. And so if you are in the midst of it, in the thick of it, I want you to first off prioritize yourself, because nothing is more important than prioritizing yourself, your well-being, your health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual first. Because if that is not intact, then other parts of your life, I think, will start to fall apart. And that is a big thing, because it goes back to that, when you're on an airplane, because I've been on a few lately, is, put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others. That is exactly what you need to do to be able to move through whatever this period of life is. And of course, remembering that everything is temporary. Everything is temporary. And that is a huge reminder I have been reminding myself constantly, is this moment, like if there's a moment of frustration or stress or just anxiety, not knowing what, is happening, is understanding that this feeling is temporary, and just accepting that in a few hours, days, weeks, months, you will not be in the same situation. And so, and this feeling and everything, and it'll shift and change. And so that has been really helpful for me in the last few weeks. But I hope that you have found this episode insightful, helpful. You're just kind of curious what's going on with me. Thank you for listening. Like I said, I have a big anniversary coming up by the time this episode airs. It'll be 1 year that I'm fully working on my own with my own company, KBA, Katerina Architecture, Inc. And it has been a whirlwind of a year. Business-wise, personally, just the growth that I have experienced this last year has been incredible. And I'm so proud of myself, of where I am, where my business is. The hard work that I have put into it has been absolutely incredible. So I hope you maybe even find some inspiration from this, no matter where you are in life right now, what chapter of life, what chapter of your life you're in. Just know that you're going to get through this. You've got this. Everything is temporary, and prioritize yourself. And if you're a person like me, make a list, write down the priorities, and it'll be really interesting for you to see what things start to fall off the list that you thought were really needed to get done, but could either be delegated or just done at a later date, or maybe not even necessary to get done. So just remember, prioritize yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have found it insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and click that like button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, and you can also further your support of From the Honeycomb by visiting the Patreon link provided in the show notes. Your contribution helps make more episodes possible. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, A Spark of Positive Energy, that comes out on the 7th of each month. Thank you so much, and see you next Friday.